Hey, what's up? It's Frankie here, and we're going to be talking about pricing your stuff, doing it in such a way that you get maximum top dollar for what you're doing with minimum pushback, and how to find out actually how much clients will actually pay for what it is you're going to do for them. And I found a really cool way to test that. So let's get into that. So before we get into how much you should charge and how to actually feel that out, and by the way, there's a magic question I'm going to give you at the end of this video that'll tell you exactly how to find out how much people would pay you, not theoretically, but in real life numbers, so that you know, and then you can hit that magic spot and say, here's my number. So first things first, let's talk about the single biggest thing that determines how much money a client is willing and able to pay you, and that is who the client is themselves. And so this is a little bit different than how most people think about this, because most people think the single biggest factor is myself, my offer, and all the cool things that I do. And it actually has a whole lot more to do with who you hire. So I'll give you an example in the roofing space. One of our awesome clients, Dan, when we were first starting to work with roofers, we partnered a little bit until I got a little fed up with working with roofers personally. And one of the things that happened was we got a guy named Eddie the roofer, who was kind of like a, for lack of a better term, drunken redneck. And I remember we ran some Craigslist ads and got some phone calls for him. And I remember Eddie saying, I don't want to pay for him because I'm already running Craigslist myself. And I tried to explain, well, your Craigslist ads suck and don't get any phone calls, and mine are good and they do get phone calls. So like, regardless of whether you're on Craigslist or not, my stuff works. And I remember thinking it was like pulling teeth. And I remember a couple of months later, Dan got a revenue share deal with this really big entrepreneurial roofer who had 7 offices. They served 30 locations. They had multiple crews. And the guy came to him in a meeting driving a McLaren F1, which, for those of you guys who aren't car people at the time anyway, was the most expensive production car in the world and the fastest production car in the world. And so he pulls up in $1 million sports car, shows up with a Gucci bag and takes out 10 grand, plops it on the table and says, I came here to spend money. What's it going to cost me to get you? And the biggest factor, by the way, in how much somebody's going to pay you for your services in those examples is whether or not you are pitching to Eddie or to the roofer dude, or the entrepreneurial Gucci bag McLaren roofer dude, I should say. So one of the best things you can do to make that happen more predictably and systematically for you, just pitch your shit to people who are actively spending money. It sounds so simple, but I use this analogy a lot in our mastermind, and it's so simple when you understand it. Imagine what we do is comparing it to selling shoes. What most people do is they think about selling to people who need it, right? So it's like selling to people who are barefoot. Eddie would be an example. Somebody's barefoot. Eddie wants to grow his business. He clearly needs some marketing. But at the end of the day, Eddie's never going to pay a whole bunch for marketing. That's where the other roofer dude wants the best of everything. He's the kind of guy who owns a closet full of 200 pairs of shoes. And when you're out there selling shoes, logic dictates, says, we should go and sell it to somebody who's got no shoes on. In actuality, what you want to do, sell your stuff to people who got a closet full of shoes instead of chasing people who are barefoot. So that's actually the single biggest thing that'll make a difference in your price. Second thing, by the way, and if you've followed me for a little while, you've heard this before, but it's worth repeating because it's one of those things, the more you get, the more value it is for you, which is, are you bringing clients, nickel clients or $100 bill clients? So in the dentist space, for example, a dentist, if they get a checkup, if they get a client or a patient who comes in for a checkup, they usually charge $100 to $150, and they have overhead costs and they don't make any money. And a lot of times the patient thinks, what did I just pay for? All you did is look in my mouth to tell me my teeth are fine. I knew that before you came in here, right? So the person's not super thrilled about paying that. That's an example of a nickel. Now, another example is, imagine you bring for a dentist somebody who's looking for implants and is willing to pay $35,000 for a major dental procedure. I'd be willing to bet that that dentist would be willing to pay you more for that. So all things being equal, if you're generating leads and business for these people, you might as well bring them $100 bills. And the more you bring them $100 bills, the more your fees are going to go up proportionately. I experienced this. I remember offering a package to a lawyer when I was first starting out. It was $1,000 and they told me, I don't know, it's really, really expensive. And then I found out a month later they hired an SEO company that I know charges $4,000 a month. And I was kind of heartbroken. I was offering a starter package for $1,000 one time and they told me it was too much money. And somebody else offered them $4,000 per month for a year, 48 grand, if you will. And they were like, hey, let's do it. So just goes to show you that it's the value you bring is determined. And that's the third thing I wanted to talk about is the actual value you bring to the table. And value, by the way, is not just measured in money. It's also measured in 4 other areas. One of those is the time you save people. Another one of those is the energy you save people, like do you make their life easier? Another one of those is the reputation, how you benefit their public image and so forth. And then the last one is their identity. And then, of course, money is in there. But we tend to think of value only as money. And the more actual value you bring to people, the more they're going to pay you. So if you want to think about getting paid more, instead of thinking about how much will people pay me, think about how can I bring the maximum amount of value to the table in the shortest amount of time. That's the easiest for these people to experience. And what you'll find is your fees go up really, really well. So an example of this in the lawyer space, I have a friend named Stephen Fairley who's kind of the top dog. Stephen Fairley makes $450,000 every time he does a speech on stage. In terms of sales he makes at the back of the room, that's not a bad day at the office to make $500,000 to give a 45-minute talk. And one of the things Stephen was doing was driving through the state of Arizona. The state of Arizona looks a lot like this. If you're driving through it, by the way, if you've ever been, it's a lot like Mexico. It's dirt roads and cactuses. You know, there's some cities in between, but if you're driving across the state, there's a lot more just dirt and cactuses and dryness. Cacti, I should say. No grammar Nazis correcting me on that. And one of the things that Stephen did is he reached out to a lawyer that he saw the guy's billboard, 187 times driving through the state of Arizona, and told him, if you change these 4 words to these 2, it'll work better. Why don't you try it? And if it works, you can pay me $50,000. And the guy tried it, it worked, and he paid Stephen $50,000. Not a bad day at the office. But when you think about that, if it works for that lawyer and he gets better results across his 100 billboards, is that not worth it for him too? Right? So the value has been brought about that in a very, very quick period of time by just changing 2 words. So the more you can think about your value as not the doing, but how quickly you can get somebody to that end result, the better it's going to be for you. So those are the 3 biggest things that are actually going to affect your pricing. Just who you make the offer to, what the end result you're bringing them, and then the total value in terms of ease and speed and how you just make their life easier. And usually the higher net worth somebody, the more important it is to save them time and energy and things like that. So this brings me to the magic question. How do you find out? You're sitting with a client and you have no idea what you should charge. In the beginning, I charged $400 a month for my SEO in 2007. Seemed like a cool number. I had no real basis for it other than it just made sense to me. That's obviously not how you want to charge. So here's a simple question to ask your client. Let's say you do SEO, or you do web design, or you do whatever. It's just to say, can I ask you something? You can be completely honest if you want, by the way. You can just say, I'm actually not sure how much I should charge for something like this. If we could get you blank end result, what would that be worth to you? And there's a real magic to that, because what people will do, by the way, is often inadvertently they will reveal how valuable that end result really is to them. So I've had people say things like to me, like, hey, well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? And what does that mean, by the way, if somebody says that's a $1 million question, isn't it? They just told me that that result is worth millions to me. It is totally invaluable, right? Well, now I shouldn't be charging $400 a month for that SEO if I can realistically deliver that result. So yeah, so I hope that's really helpful to you guys who are doing your pricing, because the easiest way to find out is just to say, hey, if we could do blank for you, what would that be worth? And they usually will not give you a direct numerical answer, but they'll hint at it through, like I said, oh, that's the $1 million thing. Wow, they'll say, I've paid other people like $5,000 a month to try and get that. And you go, okay, all right, little note. You're willing to pay $5,000 a month to get that. So hope that's helpful to you guys in figuring out your pricing, because you want to do your pricing in a way where it's, obviously the maximum for you, but it's also like works harmoniously for the client and what they're okay with paying for that kind of thing. And that's the best way I found to do that. So that's all I got for you guys. May the force be with you. It's hot as balls. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe.